My name is Jeremy Hatch. I'm here from North Bay Schools Insurance Authority. We are the group that does all your insurance stuff. I'm a safety specialist with the group. And my goal is to do training with you guys, keep you safe on the job going forward into the new school year. And, because ultimately the goal is to be safe on the job, not incur any injuries that prohibit you from doing the stuff that you love to do in your free time outside of work, right? Who wants to be hurt on the job and not be able to enjoy the things outside of the workplace that you guys enjoy? So that's why we're doing some safety training here today. We have a lot of topics. It's going to be, about 45 minutes here, and hopefully my clicker works. Okay, here's the agenda for this morning. Just some general overview of safety here at Solano County Office of Ed. What is the Injury and Illness Prevention Program? Back injury prevention. Back injuries are our #1 injury type that we see with all 14 school districts that I work with through North Bay. Oh, hitting my microphone there. Ergonomics, computer workstation ergonomics, and it's great you're all sitting in front of a computer because we can kind of go through the setup of those as well. Just some on fire safety and evacuation. We do the fire extinguisher training. That's an annual training that's required. And then integrating safety into everyday work practices. When I'm finished, there will be a bloodborne pathogen video that you have to endure. And I'll be running out the door so I don't have to see that for the 500th time. So anyways, if you have any questions throughout the program, raise your hand, get my attention somehow, and I'm happy to answer your questions. So again, why are we here today? To communicate the importance of safe work practices, being safe on your job. There's so many variables, and I know you guys work in all different sites. You have different situations. You work with students, some don't, some work at computers. There's so many variables, but we have to think about each job that we do and what are the safe work practices for the tasks that we do on a daily basis. Comply with the training requirements. Again, every year, that's why we're here. And it seems like it's only been a few months, I swear. This year, the years go by faster and faster. It's crazy. Again, reducing the number of injuries, reduce lost work time, better quality of life for employees. And that's really the key, better quality of life. And safety is really when nothing happens. Now, I'm not saying you can go back to your sites and do nothing all day, but safety is when everything goes according to plan, there's no issues, and people don't incur injuries. And the Injury and Illness Prevention Program, the IIPP, I might have shared this with some of you a few years ago. It used to be part of this presentation. I've added it again just to give you a simple reminder of what it is. This is the program from Cal OSHA for which we do all this safety stuff. The Injury and Illness Prevention Program, it's basically the written employer's safety plan. Any entity, any business in the state of California with 10 or more employees has to have an IIPP. And the anticipated results basically reflect what I was talking about in that last slide: minimizing injuries, controlling costs, maintaining staff morale. There's 8 elements to the IIPP, and remember this acronym, IIPP, because the test at the end of the program has a lot of acronyms on it, so memorize all this stuff. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. They're good. They're very diligent. I saw everybody go for their paper. No tests, I promise you guys. I promise you guys, yeah. You guys know I don't give tests, right? Yeah. Look at you. Yeah. That's true. Okay, there is hard evidence. So the 8 elements of the IIPP is who's committed, who's responsible for the program. It kind of goes, from the top down. It goes all the way from the superintendent. We have a very active safety committee here at SCOE. Is anybody on the safety committee in this room this year? You were. Yeah, it kind of rotates and there's different people on it. Very good active safety committee. It's run through Alton. Peggy Roselli is kind of the lead on all of that stuff. One of the other components is compliance. What type of compliance issues do you have to deal with? How safety is communicated, hazard assessments. We do, I personally go and do site inspections as well as playground inspections at a lot of the SCOE sites, the standalone sites, as well as the district sites that you guys are on. Fairfield, Vacaville, where else? Benicia. Okay. So we do all that stuff. Incident and exposure investigations, if there is an accident, we follow up on those. Hazard correction, that's usually through like the work order process at your sites. Training and instruction, like we're doing here today, and then the record keeping element. And that's why it's really important, sign the sheets, whenever you do this training, because we got to keep records of all this stuff as well. So that is the IIPP. Any questions on that? Just a little overview of why we're here today. No biggie. Back injuries. Like I said, back injuries are our number one most severe injury type that we see with all of our districts, meaning they cause the longest lost time as well as the most expensive injuries. Oftentimes people with back injuries suffer with them for years and years, if not their lifetime. Obviously, these are some poor postures lifting these items, and we're going to kind of go through some of that stuff. Prevention is really the key. Obviously there are accidents that occur. I mean, people get in automobile accidents or they slip and fall and they hurt their back. That's different from being, using preventative measures when you're lifting. But prevention is really the key. We see across the board with all employee groups that handling materials is the most common source of injury, meaning picking up items, carrying and lifting, those kind of things. With our custodial group, it's repetitive motion, lifting garbage. In your situations, if any of you may have to work with students where you're doing transfers, lifting furniture, boxes of books, things like that, whatever you do on a routine basis, cleaning up the classrooms, organizing, things like that. Even if you don't lift really heavy materials, it's that repetitiveness of the jobs as well as poor body mechanics when lifting, and we're going to go over some of that. If you really injure the structure of your back, like the real, nuts and bolts that, if you've ever heard of like a bulging disc, or sometimes people's discs get so, broken down that they have to have a fusion, things like that. It's really hard to be back to 100% with your back. So prevention, again, is really the key. Here's what your back, a healthy back should look like. This is from the front to the back. You have all the vertebrae, and you have the discs in between, which act as cushions and allow the back to be flexible and to move. This is looking from the side. This is the back here. This is going forward. And you do have that natural curve in your back, and the important thing is that that natural S curve really keeps your back locked into position. Keeping the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar curves aligned keeps your back nice and straight. And the key to this slide is trying to keep your ears, shoulders, and hips stacked. So everything we do, whether it's going down to the floor, I drop my remote, and I go down to the floor, I should be keeping good posture, keeping my ears, shoulders, and hips stacked when even picking up an item like this. You look down on the floor to pick it up, but when you come back up, try to lock it into position. And the key to that is really trying to suck in your lumbar curve, and it will lock your back into position. What muscles should be doing the most work when lifting? Your legs, right? So it's really important to keep the strength of your legs. A lot of you might be on your feet all day long and you're tired from your job and you don't want to go home and exercise, you don't want to walk, you don't want to, do things to strengthen your body. But it is really important, even for those that have really physical jobs, to try to keep strong and healthy so that you do have the strength to properly lift and squat down. Now, obviously, if you have, knee problems, things like that, I've been, over the years, developing knee problems, and I have this issue now that I've never had. It's part of the aging process, and it's inevitable. So it is more difficult for me to squat down normally, but even if you squat down, trying to keep your ears, shoulders, and hips stacked, you're at a table or a desk, supporting yourself and going down on one knee, something like that, and trying to keep good posture when doing that. I often I'll go into classrooms and I see staff members working around tables with students, and they're in that hunched position. So again, try to keep that reminder to keep your posture straight. If you have to sit in a chair or if you have to squat down to work with those students, try to keep that in mind as well. Just those kind of simple reminders to keep your back safe. One of the other things that we see, we see a lot of trips, slips, and falls from people lifting and carrying things, and they can't see where they're going. So really think tasks through. If you have 5 boxes of books or you have a lot of materials to carry across the campus, get a hand truck, get a dolly, get a cart, something like that to help you out. Think the task through, plan ahead. If you have to prop doors open, that's another really important thing, because I see people all the time with their hands full, struggling, carrying something, trying to push the door open. And so, analyze the task, try to make it easier and safer. If you work with students and there's transfers involved, things like that, there's a lot you can do if you really try to think those things through and plan ahead. Using your power zone. Again, this is very similar to the keeping the good posture thing, ears, shoulders, and hips stacked. When you're in the power zone, you're strongest between your knees to your neck. There's like this imaginary box right in front of you. Anytime you go outside of it and you twist or you're stooping down below knee level, you're putting a lot more stress on your low back. So you really want to be aware of that as well. It's just a really simple reminder, keeping things within this power zone and not twisting outside where it's putting a lot of leverage and compression on your back, and especially those discs in the low back. You're much stronger within that area. So that's another concept of back safety. And then here's the last thing, is keeping it locked in. Now, powerlifters, anybody been watching that on the Olympics? There was a world record, and I forget where he was from. It was either Russia, it was Eastern European, and it's insane how much they lift. It seems like it's physically impossible. I mean, the bar is bending, there's plates this deep on each side of the bar. And, they couldn't do that. They wear a back belt, and all that does is really remind them to keep their posture. It doesn't save them from injury, but it reminds them to keep that back locked in. And the last thing they always do when they go to lift that heavy weight, when they go down and grab it, they bring their head up and lock their back into position. And again, it's that same idea of keeping your ears, shoulders, and hips stacked. When you bow your back and you're in that rounded position, there's up to 10 times the amount of disc pressure on the vertebrae on the disc between the vertebrae and your back. So if that's a 30-pound item and I'm picking it up like that, up to 300 pounds of pressure on those discs. And you can see how that could definitely cause some injury. So always remember to get your head and shoulders up and lock it into position. And here's just a diagram of all the things we just covered. If you do have a heavy or bulky item or tables, things like that, don't struggle with them. Try to get a teammate, have a coworker try to help you out. And on those team lifts, try to coordinate them. So you go and you pick up, there's that table in the classroom you have to lift. You get in position, you get your feet shoulder width apart, you bend your knees, grab the table, you coordinate with your coworker, ready, lift, so you guys are on the same page. That's really important. This is that twist outside the outside the power zone. You want to avoid the twisting, and then that's that bowed position like I just talked about with that pressure. And then, hand trucks, dollies, carts, best thing going if you need to transfer a bunch of items. I just had to move my my office, and thankfully we have like a big plastic cart. I loaded everything on it instead of carrying handfuls of stuff. I still need to put everything away, but I'm in the process. But hand trucks, dollies, carts, things like that are really important. So here's just the basic steps for a proper lift. Size up the load, focus on the lift, get in close within that power zone, squat down, keeping that good posture, make sure you have a good grip on the item so it doesn't fall or slip out of your hands. Maintain that S-curve by sucking in the lumbar, head up, straight up, and lift in one smooth motion. And some other tips, always lift with your legs, nose between the toes, and I don't mean that literally, but if you're that flexible, that's kind of awesome too. But again, it's that twisting. Outside of your toes, you're twisting your back, okay? Be aware of trip or slip hazards. We talked about that when you're carrying items. Push, don't pull. You're much stronger when you're pushing an item. When I work with staff that are pushing and pulling wheelchairs, you know, if you can push, you're in a much stronger position using the strength of your legs and locking your back. When you pull, you have that tendency to round. And sometimes you have to pull, you know, you don't have, I was just working with the transportation folks last week, and when they get the wheelchairs up on the ramps of the bus, they have to pull them up and get them in position when they use the lift. And so the reminder with that is still lock in your back and try to keep it straight. Bend the knees is going to help in that situation. And then again, exercise is really the key. Trying to keep strong, and it's going to really help you physically in the long run. Any questions on the back injury stuff? We're good? Okay. Rolling right along. I may have discussed this with you before, but for those of you that work at a computer workstation, we're just going to go through again, just some general reminders of how it should be set up. Now everybody's sitting at a computer here, so it's a really good way that we can kind of go through this process. The first thing when adjusting the workstation is adjusting the chair. So you always want to adjust your chair first, either making sure your feet are flat on the floor or that your chair is in a high enough position to where your hands on the keyboard are nice and flat and your elbows are at their sides. Now, like with the photo that I showed you at the beginning, this has a keyboard tray, so that's very adjustable. There's a footrest there. If the person was shorter in stature, you know, and their chair had to be up, they could put their feet up on the footrest. You know, the monitor being up on the CPU allows it for good, you know, level visually. So there's some variables there. So your chair is going to kind of affect the way everything else is set up. The other important thing on your chair is having the same when we talked about the back injury prevention, having your lumbar curve supported. So if you're in a job where your tasks are computer-based or you're in a seated position for long periods of time, you want that lumbar curve to really have adequate support. Like these chairs don't have an adjustable lumbar, but I mean they're fairly comfortable for a task chair. A lot of chairs have a lumbar cushion on, well, the back cushion itself has a little curve to it, and you can adjust that in or out or up or down. You just want to make sure that it's pushing in that lumbar area to give you support. Some chairs have armrests, things like that, and it really depends on the level of your arms if those work, those kind of things. Reach requirements. For a lot of you, you know, setting up the keyboard and the mouse on the desktop might be adequate. It might be at a good level. And with using the computer and the keyboard and mouse, again, you want your elbows to be relaxed at their sides. You want your hand, wrist, and forearm to be fairly level. Now it can be slightly downhill in a negative tilt as well, but you really want to avoid that extension of the hands. You know, when your hands are like this, that puts a lot of pressure on your wrists and hands. You want them to be as flat as possible. So a standard 30-inch, 29, 30-inch desktop might be fine depending on your height and how long your torso is. There's so many variables. But if you have a keyboard tray, you want to make sure that your hands and wrists are nice as flat on the keyboard as well. If you're constantly reaching for binders or the phone or your calculator, things like that, and your arms extended, try to bring those items in closer to where you're not at an extended arm's reach, putting stress on your shoulders or your other joints. Focal requirements. Now, when you're looking at these monitors sitting on the desktop, what do you think the problem is with most of these? Too low. Too low, right? So in that case, this should probably be up, about that level. unless you have bifocals.
I have to keep mine low.
Yeah, he has to keep his low.
Thank you.
I was wondering about that, but I could. Yeah,
I have
so
to have mine low because
yeah,
of that,
so in that case, he has bifocals and he uses the reading portion of the lens. So the monitor is better in that lower position. Now, if you have glasses with just a standard lens or you don't wear glasses at all, you really want that monitor level to be up even with your eyes, so you aren't, stooping down, or if it's too high. Oftentimes people will have the bifocal, the monitor will be too high and their neck is in this position all day because they're trying to read through the glasses. So making sure your monitor is nice and high to where you're in a good seated posture and your neck is nice and straight. Some other concerns, laptops and tablets. Everybody's using them now. I go to meetings all the time and people are just on their tablets like this with their neck in that, in that position. Everybody's looking at their phones. Laptops just set up on a desktop are way too low for proper neck posture, So if a laptop is being used for your main computer, you should really prop it up on a stand or a stack of books, bricks, whatever you have. Get it up high enough so visually it's at the right level, and then get a keyboard and mouse external that you can use with the laptop. Real simple solution. That's what I do at home if I'm doing a bunch of stuff on my laptop. Other concerns, heavy keyboard or mouse use. Oftentimes I'll go in to do ergonomic evaluations. I do a lot of those, and people have their dominant hand, they have symptoms in their dominant hand, like tendonitis. You might, some people even get to the point where they have carpal tunnel and things, and it usually starts in their dominant hand. Heavy mouse usage, gripping on the mouse for long periods of time, really does start to irritate, especially the wrist area. So be aware of that. I always tell people mouse and then rest your hands. If you're doing a lot of input on a keyboard, you need to take breaks because, even though it's an active thing, it is putting stress on your hands. And if you're not set up correctly, it can definitely cause some problems. And then the vision thing. I wear glasses mainly just on the computer. And you might find that, you're constantly squinting to look at things, even if you have a big monitor. But that is something that can really start to take its toll on you and put you in a body position that's not healthy. So those are some other concerns with ergonomics. Oh, any questions on that? We're good? Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure. Oh, who's asking? Oh, right.
Advice about putting heavy stuff into cars.
Into cars. I know,
And
it's
out
the
of-
worst.
That's something that I myself, because I'm going from site to site, and I have my, usually quite a bit of stuff.
Yeah, and trunks are a very awkward.
What to do,
I know. I know, and that's something that I've talked about that a lot, and getting in and out of trunks of cars is a very awkward posture, and it's, what are you going to do? Put your leg up in the trunk and keep your back straight? Yeah. And the main thing with that, again, even if you're leaning forward, try to bend the knees a little bit and keep your back as straight as possible. Try to break up those items or take things out one at a time so it's not as heavy. I mean, that's the only advice I really have. Because it is awkward. I mean, trunks now being cut out mostly are much easier to access than they were, 30 years ago when you had this big high trunk and had to reach way into it. But it is just that's one of those lifts. If you can bring it up to the edge and try to prop it up before you assume the complete weight of the load, putting it in little crates and things like that that have good handholds can be helpful. I actually have one of those rolling carts that's it's basically like a folding plastic crate. I don't know if you've seen those. And they have the handholds on them. And it's pretty convenient because you can, you put the handle down and it has those handholds and it's much easier to grab getting out of the trunk of your car. So I know I talked to, the worst was when my kids were little, putting them in and out with those car seats. And it's so awkward, and so many new parents have bad backs because they're just lifting those car seats. And it's not easy. It's not easy. But using hand trucks and dollies, things like that, I don't, but it's tough. I understand. Anything else? Okay, on to the fire extinguisher, fire safety, and fire extinguisher use. Again, this is one of the annual trainings that we must provide for all staff. I know you guys are at all different sites. You probably have your fire drills at least twice a year, with either with the district sites or with the SCOE sites. So just going through this, basically how does a fire work? Heat, fuel, oxygen, chemical chain reaction, poof, there's flames, there's smoke. And fire extinguishers are designed to remove one or more of the fire's components. Here's the basic types of fires. Class A, wood, paper, cloth, trash. Class B, flammable liquids, oil, gas, or grease. Class C, electrical or energized electrical equipment. Class D, combustible metals. And Class K, cooking oils or grease. Most common type of fire extinguishers found in schools, multi-purpose dry chemical like this one here. This thing weighs like 60 pounds. It's crazy. This is probably much larger than most that you'll find in the classrooms. It's probably, double the size, at least. They're usually a little skinnier. But that's the multi-purpose ABC dry chemical extinguisher. Class K, I have a picture and a few slides here. Those are found mostly in kitchen areas, and then carbon dioxide extinguishers, which are mostly found like in server rooms or computer labs, things like that. But they all have a specific use. The thing about the multi-purpose dry chemical extinguisher, and look at that, that's the exact extinguisher. I've been doing my homework here. They're good for Class A, Class B, and Class C fires. There's basically baking soda. There's a fine powder under pressure in this cylinder. There's a pressure gauge that's in the green, means that it's still in good working condition. This little sign-off sheet, there's an inspection, little inspection check thing here, and somebody's been diligent about doing that on a monthly basis to check that it's in the green and that it's still in good working condition. Class K, like I said, are found in the kitchens. There's a mix of dry and wet chemicals. There's also a pressure gauge. And mostly the important thing about these is if there's like a grease fire, it will stick to the grease. Now these A, B, and C extinguishers, just the regular ones, will also work in a grease or a kitchen fire as well. But these Class K are really designed specifically for the kitchen environment. They're stainless steel, so they can be cleaned easier, things like that. And then carbon dioxide. Basically that's just a cylinder filled with carbon dioxide that displaces the oxygen in a fire, pushes the oxygen out of it, and snuffs out the flames. Now, I've only really seen those in server rooms. We have one outside our server room at work, and I guess the purpose really is so it doesn't damage the equipment with powder, but if the equipment's on fire already, I'm like, it's already toast, right? So that's kind of interesting, but that's what those are for. And how to use a fire extinguisher. Now, unfortunately, we don't get to do training anymore like in the old days, but just to give you the simple method. And does anybody remember the PASS method? What does that acronym stand for before I continue? Anybody remember? Obviously, the first P, the P is pull the pin. A.
Squeeze.
Yes, she got it right there. You get extra, I don't know, something. Yeah, extra breakfast back there this morning. So that's correct. Pull the pin. So the pin is up here on top. You would pull this, which would release the trigger. You're going to aim it at the base of the fire. This one, the hose is attached. So you could either do this, or you could make it easier on yourself and take the hose off. Aim it at the base of the fire. You are going to squeeze the handle, and in this case, the handle that you hold on to is at the bottom, but you would squeeze this trigger down. So pull the pin, aim, squeeze, and then sweep from side to side, okay? Now, I have to tell you, most common fires we see in the school sites are, garbage cans, occasional lockers, things like that. Fortunately, we haven't seen anything too big that a fire extinguishers had to be used, but they are used on occasion. So That is the method for using the fire extinguishers. Obviously, if a fire gets to that point, the fire extinguisher is not going to work. And that looks like, you know, any one of your portables at many of the sites at our schools. And so obviously, if the fire is to that point, you know, you don't have an extinguisher, your first role and responsibility is evacuating the building, especially with your students, right? And that's paramount. If there is a fire, obviously dial 911. The alarm poles such as these are located in many buildings, usually in hallways or near the entrances or exits of the buildings. Use your emergency procedures, you know, and those are all things that you'll have training on throughout the school year. Any questions on the fire safety? And again, that is, you know, the most important thing for most of you is using the evacuation procedures and getting the students out safely. When I do this training for custodians, they're kind of our first line of defense for a lot of things at the sites, and they would probably be the ones, if it was an all call to everybody that there is a fire, to grab a fire extinguisher and try to put that out, or site security, people like that. But it is good to know how to use one, and just remember when you go back to your sites, make some visuals of where they're located, where the alarm poles are, things like that, going forward into the school year. No questions on that? Okay, just some everyday work practices, integrating safety into that. Like I said, back injuries are our number one most severe injury type. Slips, trips, and falls are our most common incidents that occur. And that's something we really want to, you know, concentrate on going through the school year. I like this photo. If you can't read this, it says, sidewalk is open, you're safe to pass. This is a scaffold, not a ladder. No bad luck for walking under. I thought that was, I took a picture of that. I thought that was pretty good. You know, the caution tape and everything, it's kind of overkill, but, you know, they did a good job with it. So observe those safety warning signs. You know, if you see caution tape, if you see cones, you see the wet floor signs, please don't walk on those. And I'm sure in the next couple weeks I'll see somebody trip on the wet floor coming into their sites to set up their classrooms. Keep emergency equipment accessible. Don't block fire extinguishers, alarm poles, things like that. Wear required personal protective equipment. If you're in charge of cleaning procedures or first aid procedures, always wear gloves. I go in all the time to front offices of sites, and you see a kid come in with a scraped knee, and the office staff just grabs a paper towel and wipes it up, you know, without putting on gloves. Always use your personal protective equipment. Most case gloves are the most common thing. Housekeeping, again, slip, trip, and fall hazards. When I go out and do our site inspections, slip, trip, and fall hazards are the number one thing that we write up as well. Cords across floors, frayed carpet, cracked concrete outside of areas, you know, doormats that are turned up that people might trip over. So really be aware of those things. If you see those kind of hazards, make sure to turn in a work order or let your supervisor know, because it's really good to be preventative with all of those things. Use ladders and step stools for overhead work, not chairs, and especially not chairs with wheels, please. And this just happened. We just had an incident. I was up in St. Helena doing some training, and the facilities manager up there said he walked into a meeting and it was all the new teachers, and the HR manager stepped up on a chair and just flipped right over. And he was like, she jumped back up. She was fine, but he was like, it could have been really bad. And he's like, can I go get you a step stool, you know? And they had one available right there in the building, but people take shortcuts. And we see so many. The most severe injuries I've seen since I've worked with North Bay, some of the most severe have been falls from people not using step stools and ladders properly. You know, we had a fall from a bookshelf. She stepped up on a bookcase to close the window, the curtains or something, and fell and broke her hip. And so really, if you don't know where a step stool or ladder is at your site, ask around if you need one, and really use the proper equipment for doing that work. I know Fairfield, they bought like 300 step stools or something in the last couple years, and they have them at various locations throughout the site. So it's just a matter of kind of asking around. And if you don't have one, and you need one frequently, that's something you should really look into as well. If there's any sanitation issues, that's obviously something to keep in consideration. Keep aisles and stairwells clear so people don't trip over things. Reduce accumulation of combustibles. Usually when the fire departments come in and do their inspections, they're looking at the classroom walls. They're looking for combustible materials, i.e. paper, all over the walls. And you can only have 20% of your walls covered with combustible materials. It's kind of a hard thing to judge, but that is something that the fire department will look for as well. Maintain access to exits, firefighting equipment, electrical panels. The big thing, especially in those portables that have two entrances, a lot of portables will have a back door. You can't block that back door. And I've seen even equipment carts and things shoved in front of the back door. They need to be moved, and that you need to have at least 36 inches of egress around that door. So just keep that in mind as well. And there's an example. And I saw this during one of my inspections, and you probably can't read that, but basically it says that under Cal OSHA guidelines, there needs to be 36 inches of clearance around these electrical panels. And that's where they put the bad kids, right in front of them. They put that desk up against it. I go, what, did they give them water and a piece of metal to play with in front of them? I don't know. So those things can't be blocked. And I can't tell you how often I see these things. I've seen posters over electrical panels to where you can't even see them, report any unsafe conditions to your supervisor immediately. Control the hazard if possible. Closing area with caution tape, etc. For maintenance issues, complete work order with safety as a priority. And always, if it is a real safety issue and you turn in a work order, make a call as well if you can. Follow up on it. And the SCOE maintenance folks are awesome. So they're usually right on top of it if it's a safety related item. Know your facility. Like I said, when you go back, kind of familiarize yourself with where the fire extinguishers, alarm poles are, your evacuation routes and procedures. You probably will be doing other drills as well, not just the fire drills at your schools. Areas where personal protective equipment is required. Eye wash and safety showers. Those are usually at the middle or high schools in the labs and things like that if you were to get a chemical in your eye. First aid kits, location of MSDS, STS sheets. Now we didn't talk about that, but those are the safety data sheets that are used for any chemicals in the workplace. Mostly the custodians at your site will have a file of those. Do any of you use like the Sani wipes in your classrooms? Okay. So I know SCOE, I'm not sure if they have it online, but there should be a safety data sheet that goes along with those that is kept somewhere at your site. And it just gives the hazard information of the Sani wipes and what to do for emergency response or if somebody has a reaction to them, those kind of things. But they're really good they have all that stuff compiled. And then who to contact with questions and concerns. And really, safety is everyone's job. We work together every day. You have so many different situations, so many different variables, but we really do have to be, proactive and work together as far as each other's safety. And going forward for this school year, just try to be safe and remember some of these things, and hopefully you'll be able to get through it and not have an injury. And with that, I'm all done. It was exactly 40 minutes, so yeah.